Something you're going to have to keep in mind when developing your iBook is the portrait and landscape orientations of the iPad. For example, what you're looking at on the screen right now is my AirServer projection of my iPad onto the Mac screen. And if I turn the iPad around into portrait mode, you'll see that that screen looks very different to that screen. And the reason for that is that iBook's author has rearranged the content to suit the portrait orientation of the iPad. Now, this is neither here nor there, it's just something that you're going to need to keep in mind. For example, if I stop scrolling there and move it back into landscape orientation, you can see that suddenly the page looks very different. The picture comes back, the text looks different, and, well, it's basically just a different experience. So how do we actually keep track of that whilst we're developing our iBook in iBooks Author? Well, let's click out and go back to the iBooks Author application and have a look. The button to keep in mind is this one up here, which is the orientation button, and you'll see the familiar symbols of landscape and portrait. If I click on these buttons, it toggles between the two views, and you can immediately see how the view changes to suit the orientation. Now, I can still scroll through the document in the same way as I could before, it's just that I'll be looking at everything in portrait mode. I can still flick through the different chapters and sections and see how they all look, and just get a feel for what the design of the book will look like if one of my students actually turns it around and starts reading it in portrait. Now, this is one of the ways that you can actually start to check for formatting errors, and I happen to know that there's a bit of a problem with the way chapter 2 looks. So if I click on chapter 2, you'll notice that things look okay in landscape orientation, but if I click on portrait, you can see that I've got a bit of a text formatting problem. Now, I can deal with this by changing the size of the text. If I double click inside the text box, I can change the size of the text maybe from size 16 down to 14. No, I've still got a bit of a problem. Let's try changing it down to size 12. You can see that's already looking much better. In order to get rid of this white space, I can hover over this light blue line and you'll see two arrows appear. I can click and drag those arrows and adjust the amount of white space, and that's looking much better. Now, if I go back to landscape orientation, I can see that that works as well, but notice that the size of the text has actually changed in both orientations. And that just highlights the importance of checking your portrait and landscape orientations as you create your iBook.